All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Really excited to have this conversation and answer all your questions. We'll start with a little bit of an introduction to ourselves, who we are and each of our respective companies. And then I'll do a little bit of an overview of, procurement and manufacturing in the state of the world today. And we'll try to keep that as brief as possible so we can get to the meat of the content here. And then, we'll turn it over to Robert at Machina Labs to talk through how he has used First Resonance, Ion, and Silkline in tandem to optimize their production operations and supply chain. So I'll go first. I'm Isaac Chambers. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Silkline. Silkline was really inspired by my work with Lockheed Martin, first on their F-35 program, helping them compress lead time as they ramp to full rate production. And then later went to their missiles and fire control division to stand up a supply and demand planning organization. And even giant advanced companies like Lockheed Martin have a lot of manual processes that go into orchestrating a really complex and diverse supply base. Everything from mom and pop machine shops to large OEMs and primes that they do business with. And for companies like Lockheed, they had their systems of record, like an SAP. And then they had all of the email and document-based workflows where the real work with suppliers actually happened. And there was this big disconnect between where the work happens and those systems of record. And it was perpetually a challenge to get the systems of record to actually reflect what was going on, in communicating with suppliers and getting up-to-date ETAs and getting information on sourcing. And so we designed Silkline to bridge that gap to fit in the native workflows so that there's minimal behavior change for our buyers and our manufacturing users and no behavior change for suppliers. So don't make your suppliers use a new system. Don't make them log in and navigate and learn a new system. Just meet them where they're at. I'll pass it off to Karan here to give his intro as well.
Great. Thank you, Isaac. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining this morning. I'm Karan Talati, CEO and co-founder of First Resonance. First Resonance, we are building the world's leading factory operating system, now powering over 50 companies in aerospace, energy, robotics, heavy machinery, defense tech. Similar to what Isaac shared, my background comes from aerospace. I spent a number of years at SpaceX with facing similar challenges, data disconnection and things like that. Of course, we had the benefit of taking a very new age approach at bringing all of that together. So I was heavily involved in bringing together information all the way up from engineering to manufacturing, and then eventually into operations when we got into flight reusability. But same patterns here exist around what systems people use, how do we flow information over to people at the right time and make them empowered to make better decisions. And in a complex environment like factories, you have considerations from supply chain into actual manufacturing processes, into quality, and as I mentioned, operations. So we're really excited to be partnered with Silkline and to be working with Machina as well. So I'll hand it off to Robert.
Great. Thanks so much. My name is Robert Reeser. I'm the purchasing manager here at Machina Labs. I come from kind of a traditional manufacturing background, from stamping and machining shops to tech OEMs. Machina Labs is a startup based out of the Los Angeles area that is working in sheet metal forming, called incremental sheet forming. We are working on some new toolless approaches to forming sheet metal for primarily aerospace, defense, and automotive market segments. And we're excited to share more about these strategic gains from Silkline and First Resonance today. Thanks.
All right. And then just to look at our agenda here. So we're going to start by discussing manufacturing, complexity as it relates to procurement. Then we're going to go into the case study with Machina Labs and then do a brief demo of Silkline and how it interacts with systems like Ion. And then, we'll open it up to Q&A, for the group and get all your questions answered. So I'm going to keep this part pretty brief because I feel like everyone in the audience probably knows all of this, being in manufacturing yourself. But this is a very complex time in manufacturing where you have a lot of changes to how supply chains are constructed, and you have a lot of manufacturing moving from overseas to North America. Maybe if it's not in the United States, it's in places like Mexico. You have a lot of prioritization of lead times and agility and resilience in supply chains rather than just cost and rate. And those factors, coupled with a lot of the rapid change that we're seeing in hardware manufacturing and all of these modern companies that are really pushing the edge of what is possible, has created this environment where there's a need for better tools than have existed in the past. And traditionally, procurement has been viewed as this kind of walled off function where engineers lob requirements over a fence, and then procurement has to take that requirement and they have to execute against it. And it doesn't consider things like design for manufacturability. There's this constant game of telephone of, hey, the supplier said this, can you do this? And that back and forth creates a lot of inefficiencies that slows down the procurement process, which then in turn slows down manufacturing. And the excuse me, that the result of all of this complexity is it's hard to understand how to source materials efficiently. You maybe don't collect all of your quote data that you have stuck in your email. And so it's hard to see, okay, what did it cost me when I purchased this last time? What quotes did I receive last time? Who even bid on my work last time? On the strategic sourcing side and being able to drive down your cost structure of your hardware. Then you have disruptions, and if you drop a PO or a supplier fails you and they are missing key information, then those disruptions can then cause a huge amount of problems for manufacturing engineers, for operations to then be able to quickly and efficiently handle those challenges as they arise. And so Silkline helps our customers solve a lot of these issues with disconnected workflows across functions. And the end result, the value for the customers is, number one, they can drive better strategic sourcing and they can reduce their direct material costs by having more complete quote data. Number two, they can prevent those operational disruptions that can cause a lot of downtime that can prevent you from shipping to your customers. And then number three, we can help to make the process more efficient and reduce the amount of time spent on admin tasks. And I saw a question from Brianna in the audience. Let's see, how do we take a look at these questions here?
Yeah, Isaac, if I see a question, I'll mention it to you. This is Ron. I think the hand went down. It might have been a mistake.
Okay. And then I touched on the impact of these challenges in procurement. And if you look globally at supply chain disruptions, 1 in every 10 years, a company is going to have a supply chain event or a supply chain disruption that's going to cost that company 30 to 50% of their EBITDA for that year. And so if you look at the global impact of that, that is hundreds of billions of dollars that are caused by these really fragile supply chains that are constructed over email and document-based workflows. And that is what we're trying to solve, is allow you to collaborate more efficiently with your suppliers so that you can avoid downtime, you can reduce your risk, and you can improve your cost structure and optimize across cost, quality, and lead time. And now I'd like to introduce Robert Reeser at Machina Labs to walk through a case study of how he uses First Resonance Ion coupled with Silkline to help them, optimize their procurement processes.
Hey everyone, how's it going? I'll tell you a little bit more about Machina Labs and kind of our mission, what we do, and what kind of challenges in the market we're trying to serve. Like I said before, we're a technology startup based out of Los Angeles County, and we're trying to unlock new manufacturing methods using robotics and artificial intelligence. So behind me, you can see a large system. It's called the Robo Craftsman system. And this is a portable sheet metal forming system that we've developed over the last couple of years that we're using to kind of push the boundaries of metal forming with no tools. So it can fit a 60-inch by 144-inch long sheet metal piece, and we can form basically almost any geometry on these, depending on the draft angle. So we're still, this technology is still in an infancy stage, and so as time goes on, we're hoping that this technology will enable rapid iteration and innovation and design to enable a flexible factory. Any factory that gets set up now, a Tesla factory in Texas spends hundreds of millions of dollars to bring up the machinery, tooling, personnel, training required to produce one product. And then, if there's changes to that product or that product is discontinued, that factory is really no longer efficient for producing that product. It can only produce that one product. And so the machine we have behind you is designed to be enabled to produce multiple products on the same machine in the same factory, just switching out feedstock. Primarily serve aerospace and defense and automotive industries. It's a wonderful place to work. I love being here. And, since starting about 2 years ago, we've kind of addressed some organizational challenges that have been posed by, what Isaac's been talking about, which is, email and phone call based procurement workflows. So challenge one is kind of our supplier communications, right? As a buyer, you live and die on your communications with your supplier, your confirmations, your quotes. And so, previously, procurement data is scattered across multiple systems. It's within your ERP system. It's within multiple people's emails, Teams, Slack, Jira boards, whatever, sources that you're using to, collect this actionable data, whether it's quotes, requests, et cetera. It's scattered. And second challenge is that, it's uncertain which suppliers are delayed. If you're in a high procurement flow environment where, you have multiple buyers and a lot of analytics feeding decision-making in your organization, you live and die on the data that comes into your company. So it can be very easy to have costly, delays in your organization that can come from, someone missing a email of a supplier saying, hey, we're not going to be able to make this delivery date. We need to push it out a couple weeks. So just one missed email, just one miscommunication can cause, all sorts of chaos for your business. One of the third challenges is that engineering resources are diverted by manual tasks. If you're going back and forth on email, asking for red lines, asking for updates to requisitions or updates to, a data system, that's really time that's not spent, performing core competencies. And so, talk a little bit more about the current state, which is, we've used Silkline to simplify requisition workflows drastically. Previously, I was kind of receiving requisitions, 30 to 60 requisitions a month through email, Teams messages, people flagging you down in the hallway. And we quickly realized that this was not a efficient workflow and waiting forward. We needed a unified solution to centralize all these requests. When we found out that this kind of solution also centralizes RFQ, order management, confirmations, supplier information, it really was a no-brainer. And it really has eliminated a lot of manual steps in our procurement.
I'm curious for folks in the audience how they're managing this process today. So I just launched a question little poll question. Um, if you can share in the poll how you're collecting your purchase recs. All right, I'm not sure if people can see the responses as they're getting answered, but we're seeing quite a mix. We have a lot of email and Slack, Jira boards, a lot of different places, and then a few in the ERP.
I think we skipped a slide, guys. Yeah, I think we did challenge 2. So let's talk about challenge 1. So challenge 1 is actually, can we go to slide 2, please? Challenge 2. So let's talk about inefficient workflows. Unnecessary administrative overhead, and time wasted. Any time that I'm wasting figuring out what one of my requisitioners need is time that I'm not spent taking care of, core competent tasks or actually taking care of their requests. And these delays can compound over time. Late on Friday extends to one weekend, extends to a couple days later, and slowly but surely you're behind deadline on your project. It truly is a waste of time going back and forth with requisitioners through email and Slack Teams to nail this stuff down. And one of the things that I really enjoy about Silkline is how centralized everything is. The team has worked really well to improve the product over the last 6 months we've been using it, and we've really had a lot of organizational gains utilizing this.
And it looks like we have a question here in the audience, what recs means, whether it's requests or requirements. In this case, we're talking about requests, so purchase requests. But that actually raises an interesting point, is requirements change all the time. And I'm curious, Robert, how do you manage that handoff with engineering requirements as drawings are getting released all the time and you have a lot of ambiguity in what those requirements are and how that relates to the purchase request process?
Sure. So, in an engineering organization, you're going to work on a lot of R&D and prototype stuff. There's going to be things that aren't, quote unquote, released to production. And we're going to have to move forward on orders and quoting for basically pre-release items. In the case that we're doing that, we want to convert these items to kind of requests or requisitions for goods and services rather than parts. And not basically a strategy that we kind of use is if an item is released and we're planning to make it in a certain quantity at a certain time, then we're going to utilize manufacturing resource planning reports to pull inventory from our system to let us know what inventory we need to buy, what inventory we need to source to kind of complete this challenge. But during the kind of pre-release process, the onus is more on kind of my engineering organization to help define what exactly it is that they want. As in purchasing, you're kind of a fixer. You touch every part of the business. Almost every employee, has something that they want from you, and it's your role to help solve those problems as they come up. But you can't fix everything. You can't source everything, and doing that is really dependent on having clear requirements. So in the case where there's not clear requirements, I tend to push it back to kind of requesters to more clearly scope their requirements and their needs.
Yeah. And I think that there is variability or ambiguity for all types of manufacturers. For a company like Machina that has a lot of rapid engineering, you're getting variability in their requirements. How is the BOM changing? But if you look at a company like Lockheed, for example, their variability comes in the demand. When are we going to get on contract with the US government? How many configurations or which configurations are we going to be producing for which customers? And whether it's variability in demand forecasts or variability in the requirements, it's a challenge to figure out how do I quickly react to those changes so that I can make sure that materials actually show up on time.
Right. Yeah, and this is really a challenge related to the mission of each company and like what really is the mission of your procurement organization. Here at Machina, we have a really we our team's on the smaller side, and so throughput and agility is really valued in a lot of these requisition cases. That might not be the case in other organizations. I have personally worked in organizations that are very aggressive in pursuing cost savings for an established product line, and that is the number one goal of the procurement organization. So at all of your actions, most of your actions during your workday should be working towards that goal.
Yeah, it's the triangle, right? Like you can have good lead time, you can have good quality, or you can have good cost. You can have any two of those, but you can't have all three.
Exactly. You can get pretty close, but I don't think you can really get all three. You can get about 2.5.
Yeah.
Great. We go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the challenge 3 is missed cost savings. If you're not collating all this information together, if you're not sharing it with your coworkers, then it's not actionable. Every buyer that I have ever worked with, including myself, prior to this solution, has maintained a Bible spreadsheet of every part they've ever quoted, who they've quoted it to, what the price and quantity breakdowns are, and it's closely guarded, like like the Holy Grail, right? Because it's really the sum of the work that you've done, and it's the source of stuff like negotiation leverage, working with your suppliers to drive prices down, reducing material costs, and having full visibility into the cost savings that you get by resourcing, renegotiating purchase agreements with your vendors. So one of the things that Silkline has really helped out with in this aspect is that it's just as easy to send a quote to one vendor at a time as it is to send to one quote to 10 vendors at the same time. It's quite seamless. All of this quote data is logged in the system. This data is accessible to everyone in your organization that has the correct role that you've scoped for them. I'm sure they can be excluded if you wanted them to be, but this democratization of data really doesn't stop at cost savings or quote files. All communications that are sent out via the Silkline platform have an email inbox, and that links all communications in email, right? The normal procurement workflow that you're doing with your supplier, sending a PO, waiting for a confirmation back, acknowledging that you got the confirmation, following up on POs. All these actions and events are now logged in Silkline on the homepage for the PO, specific PO that you're discussing with your vendors. So if you're out on vacation, if you have new members of the team, it's really easy to point people towards getting the information that they want. I understand that as a buyer role, I'm going to be playing telephone a lot, right? Someone's going to ask me, please find a quote for this. I find a quote for it. I communicate back the quote details. They say, yes, please order it. I go back to the vendor, please place this order for us. It's confirmed. Go back to the requester. So there's a lot of ping pong back and forth of, transmitting information from one location to another. And while that's a big part of my role, it's great to be able to spread that, not responsibility, but privilege around to the rest of your team to be able to access this information without having to go through, the procurement team and have it kind of gate kept from them.
Robert, on this one, I'm curious, with the 100 things that you have to pay attention to in any given day, before you started using Silkline, were you doing anything to track the quotes that you received?
Absolutely. I mean, I was maintaining kind of a buyer Bible. I was religiously using Microsoft to-do lists, reminders on my phone. It's really, I think every person in supply chain that faces these challenges finds solutions and workflows that help them whether it's, alarms on your phone or reminders in Microsoft Outlook to follow up on quotes or certain emails. Everyone has kind of a different solution to this, but, Silkline has really allowed me to centralize these communications and information that I'm confident that all this information is in the system and I can access it at any time. It's very easy to find. All right, so let's talk about challenge 4 is compliance risk. Certain organizations that work with, controlled information, maybe in the aerospace realms, defense realms, ITAR. It's extremely important to follow the regulations and guidelines that are set for you in this, to not have your company run afoul with any CMMC certification or, information security certification that is relevant to kind of these spaces. The government has kind of cracked down and imposed a lot more requirements on manufacturers to follow CMMC compliance. And this can be a bottleneck to quoting out more parts to efficient procurement operations. So one of the things that, what we've found a benefit in with Silkline is the full traceability of orders and communications, like I've discussed before. Automated documentation. Our suppliers can upload certs into the portal. They can upload COCs. They can upload test reports, inspection reports, part photos, all into the Silkline portal, no problem. This documentation allows us to, have a pre-check requirement to the suppliers. Maybe your supplier needs to send inspection reports prior to shipping parts. You can have those uploaded via Silkline. We are on a government cloud instance of First Resonance Ion, just as we are on a government cloud instance of Silkline. So it matches up with our information security needs in terms of that.
And I think that there's two lenses of compliance, right? You have your external compliance requirements, like CMMC, and needing to comply with ITAR, law. But then you also have your internal compliance requirements, for example, NDAs with your suppliers, and making sure that you're not sending them files, drawings when you have an expired NDA with that supplier. I'm curious, how do you manage that process today?
We currently manage it with a spreadsheet and a list of all these NDAs. I typically try to keep a repository of these documents in our company OneDrive and notate expiration dates of files into the file name. We have another question.
Yeah, let's take a look at this. Yeah, so we have a question from Julie in the audience, and she's asking, which system did Machina use first? And was the partnership between Silkline and First Resonance already in place, or did Machina drive that partnership? And I think Machina was one of our earlier customers, and so they did really help to drive the integration between First Resonance, Ion, and Silkline, and help to really perfect that, and also really shape the product to what it is today. But they had First Resonance Ion first as the kind of core of their MES platform, and then they integrated Silkline to help manage a lot of the procurement workflows. And if you think about what an MES does, it helps to organize your data within the four walls of your factory. Our job at Silkline is to organize all of the data that is outside the four walls of your factory and then bring that into the four walls of your factory so that you can have the latest inputs on when things are going to show up. You can have certificates of conformance and test reports that you can review in advance before inventory arrives, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's correct. We've been using First Resonance Ion for about 3 years now or so here at Machina Labs, a little bit prior to my joining the company. And Silkline we've been using since late last year, and it's been great. I really can't say enough good things.
Thanks, Robert.
Maybe I'll add a few bits here as well from First Resonance. As I mentioned earlier, being deployed now across, now I think maybe like 60, 70 companies. I think Isaac captured it exactly right. A factory OS or an MES really is focused inside of the 4 factory walls, and there's so much dynamism that goes on there, right? Talked earlier about all the manufacturing processes, the quality management, and then the internal supply chain. So making sure that once parts arrive, that they're kitted out to the right work centers on time and removing those bottlenecks. So when it comes to the complexity inside, mirror that to the complexity that Isaac was talking about earlier and Robert was talking about with respect to negotiation, leverage, and the loss, kind of money side of things. Like that's I think an essential connection, because of like that or many to one aspect of what a factory builds. Let's say many parts come in, and in especially these quality critical, mission critical industries, it's many parts that turn into one product and multiple of those products. And then you think about like the mirror side of it. So it's just a completely different beast, right? Where inside of a factory, you definitely you can't have people emailing each other, so you kind of want to force the constraint. But when it comes to the supply chain, I think what I've really appreciated learning is from the supply chain perspective, lean into that, because forcing suppliers onto a tool, there's just so much overhead for procurement people that I think like Silkline uniquely appreciates and gets and makes for a good partner.
Yeah, thanks for those comments, Karan. I think other manufacturers can be kind of press ganged into using supplier portals in the past. If you have a supplier that doesn't have business with you, or a customer that doesn't have business with you, they can kind of press gang you into requiring to use their supplier portal to go through these kind of outdated and archaic processes in order to receive, confirm emails. And it can be very frustrating. You have to set up, dedicated individuals at your organization that specifically, are the only people allowed to go into these data systems, get these orders, get these confirmations, change orders. And Silkline kind of takes that out of the picture, where it really meets suppliers where they're at. We've had an incredible uptake of our suppliers using Silkline and becoming comfortable with the system, and they like it. That they really do, and I've never heard of a manufacturer that likes a customer portal website ever.
Yeah, and frankly, Robert, I think that was one of your biggest concerns initially when we started chatting, over a year ago, was, hey, what will suppliers think about this? Will they actually use it?
Right.
And we have a related question in the audience from Brianna here, and she says, how do the magic token links work from a cloud security perspective? And for a little bit of context for the audience, part of how we make Silkline really frictionless for suppliers, because you do need to share some data when you're sharing an RFQ or when you're sharing a PO, is we have these magic links where you can click the link and it loads some summary or overview information right away. So you get that preview of the content. And then if you need to download part files, we send a one-time password to the recipient's email to confirm their identity. And so for anything that's in that kind of first layer of security, the token-based link, that token expires after a period of time to make sure that that data is not just hanging out there forever. But that data is data that really should not include ITAR technical data, anything that has CUI. anything that has ITAR technical data or CUI should be protected under that second layer of security, where we are actually verifying the individual's identity and that they were the intended recipient of a particular document before they're able to download it and access it. And that's how we're able to build a system that suppliers don't need to think about creating accounts. They don't need to log in. They don't need to remember passwords. But we keep it secure and make sure that only intended recipients are accessing that protected data.
Great. Why don't we move on to the next slide? So let's talk about some measurable outcomes. I work in a business where, a single day of line down, not being able to produce can cause up to $50,000 in losses. I've worked at businesses where a single day of being lined down can cause $500,000 of losses to production and revenue. And so, staying on top of your order confirmations, on top of your schedule, on top of everything that is, in your wheelhouse as buyer is critical. It's critical to your business operations. We save a lot of time every week. I field a lot of requisitions. I field a lot of requests, and the easier it is for my requisitioners to tell me what they need, the easier it is for me to fulfill those requests. So we're fielding from anywhere from 20 to 50 requests a week across the team. And there's a significant amount of time saved in centralizing all this in one location. And this adds up significantly over time. Let's think about, what could you do with 31 extra engineering hours in your organization a week, or, adding cost savings?
I know that, for a lot of organizations, one concern is, okay, procurement really wants this, but what is the rest of the organization going to think? Like, are they going to want to adopt a new tool? I'm curious what the feedback from the rest of your organization has been interacting with Silkline.
Yeah, the feedback from the rest of the organization has been very positive. As soon as, we performed a couple trainings, as soon as we were fully onboarded by Silkline with the team, I kind of created a reference document for them, showing them what to do. And they're thrilled, honestly, to have a requisition system that fits directly in with your ERP, pulls all the parts from your ERP system. It's linked to your inventory. It's linked to the requests and the POs that are made with the requisition. They're thrilled. I can order items for someone in my organization, add them as a follower to the order. When that order comes in and is received, they automatically get an email. There's no following up of, hey, the thing that you asked for came in, send a Teams message. I don't have to do that anymore. It's automatic, as long as it's set up correctly in the interim. So we've had extremely positive feedback from inside the organization on, the impact of Silkline with the company.
Awesome. Yeah. And that's, why we designed Silkline the way that we did, to create that collaboration, and also a big part of why we felt that we should never have per seat licensing, because we feel that you shouldn't have to think about, do I add the shipping clerk? Do I add the the accounts payable person? Do I add this engineer because, is it worth it for them to participate in the process? Like, the answer should always be yes. Anyone in your organization should be able to be a part of that process and collaborate without you worrying about it costing you extra money. And then it looks like we have another question in the audience here. Is Silkline and Ion considering developing an integration where AutoPlan, which is Ion's MRP solution, hands off to Silkline for procurement? And yes, that's actually under development. We are going to have a plans feature in Silkline that will allow you to upload or import a bill of materials or a demand plan from something like AutoPlan, and then you can group similar parts into requests and flow that through the request to purchase order process, so that you can look at a total demand plan or a total bill of materials and answer the question of, have I covered everything in the bill of materials that's ready to be procured? Is it on request? Is it on order? Or is it in inventory and available to promise?
Great. All right. Are we getting into demo?
I think we were gonna hand it off to Karan for a moment to talk about, Ion and its role, within your organization.
Awesome.
Yeah, sure. I'll keep that brief if I think excited to dig into more of the show not tell. But a few things, Robert hit on this earlier, and I'm actually very curious, Robert, like when it comes to the shared data. But to give everybody an overview, I mentioned this earlier. Ion helps manufacturers conduct the day-to-day operations in their manufacturing process with all the complexity of what happens in the factory four walls. And Robert hit on this key point as well, which is all this information is pretty interrelated. So being able to analyze that information and make data-driven decisions is definitely a core tenet of our analytics and data capabilities. We see this as, and I think Isaac kind of touched on this earlier, we see this as a pretty important development to what used to be the historical context of what even ERP is. So I'll make a quick comment on that and then ask a quick question to Robert. But I think for a lot of manufacturers, especially as we're kind of almost hitting the play button after a few decades of pause, and that few decades of pause is, yes, like we're still producing, they're big factories, but they were all powered by these dated concepts and these dated legacy tools that are overly bloated, very hard to set up, very expensive to set up. And as Isaac mentioned in his introduction, even when they are set up, a lot of that kind of central system of record work is happening in some large system. There are a few gatekeepers that transact that information, but the real work, whether that's by manufacturing engineers that are building work instructions, or in this case, procurement people who are working with their supply chain, that's all happening in email, spreadsheets, et cetera, right? So how do we really bridge that gap as like an industry? The answer is probably not in the way that we used to do it. It's probably not just picking up the same tools that we left off at in development, and rather really thinking about the technology that's available today, cloud-based secure systems that are interoperable, such as First Resonance, Ion, and Silkline, that interact with systems in nuanced ways. So using magic links across email with suppliers, as opposed to, we talked about the challenges of supplier portal. Now imagine having a supplier log into your ERP and just how Herculean of an effort that is by IT, and frankly, even impossible, right? It's never actually happened. So Robert, I'm curious, from the integration that you have with Silkline and First Resonance, one, how has that interplay of data and real-time information across both systems helped people both on the procurement side as well as manufacturing and quality? And two, like, what's your vision of where all this goes? Not to go too far off into the conclusion, but I'm curious if you have a thought on that before we go into the demo.
That's awesome. Those are some really thoughtful questions. First, I think, different people in the organization are driving value from both Ion and Silkline through analytics. This is a data-driven economy. This is a data-driven world, even in manufacturing, even in the physical space where we are making things and bringing many things into one. We are dependent on this data flow. And so, one of the things that's great about First Resonance Ion is the robust analytics suite. We use it extensively in our organization, and values derived, both on my side and from our manufacturing engineers, our engineering team, to set up checks, to find mistakes, to find inconsistencies, inefficiencies, outlier events. So that hopefully that answers your first question. The second question, which is like, where is all this going in the future? Where do you think all this is going in the future? I hope to see a really great future for both of these organizations. I think that these data systems as a whole are moving more towards cloud-based, it's even organizations that have, the 40-year-old IBM green screen ERP, they still really hold on to those systems. And the reason that they hold on to them is because those systems, they don't look great, but they work, and they work very, very consistently. And that was really, the fear of a lot of organizations from moving to new ERP systems. But what we've really seen with Ion is just tremendous uptime. I mean, you guys publish your own uptime statistics, and they're phenomenal. We really have never had a significant outage in our cloud-based MES system from its inception. And Silkline factors in really closely to that. The team is extremely responsive and has, quickly jumped on reported issues or outages, and it's really exciting to see where this team's gonna go in the future, in my opinion.
Awesome. Why don't we just do a very quick demo here to make this a little bit more tangible for folks in the audience. And I won't spend much time on this, but I just wanted to give a visual for what we're talking about and how requests work in Silkline. Can everyone see my screen? Okay. So this is Silkline here, and we have a plug and play integration with Ion so that you can, get started in basically a day, and then the data syncs real time between Silkline and Ion. So if you create a purchase order or edit it in Ion, that syncs to Silkline and vice versa. And for this example purchase request here, we can see that it's been fully completed, and you can see the order that was created against it. And you can have multiple orders that are created, against a request. So you could have, 10 parts on a request, and 5 could go to one supplier and 5 could go to another. And you'd have that traceability of this request turn into one or more orders. And you can see that this particular order here has been approved through our approval process. And then if you look at the details of the request, you have the part files and the drawings that are attached, and you can click in and you can see the details of the model, the drawings, all within Silkline. And then you can view the items on the request, including things like quality clauses. A lot of our customers have to flow down quality requirements either because of their end customer or because of their internal quality processes. And then you can see for each line item which order it was placed on in case you have line items that are split across orders. And then you have the status of each of the RFQs. Let's say that just in time machining no bid this, we can record that. And then you have the quote data that's automatically extracted from the supplier's original quote document using AI. And so if I click edit here, we can see the original quote document on the left and the data that was pulled out of it on the right, using an AI autofill capability that scans the details in the quote and pulls out all of that information automatically. And that allows you to create a quote database where you can then see for any part that you've purchased, who have I purchased that part from in the past? What was the last price that they quoted it at? And what was the last price that I actually ordered from that supplier? And not just for the current revision of the part, but across all revisions, because you may not have purchased this particular revision before, but you want to know what you purchased the last revision for. And then we have our activity feed here where you can see all of the RFQs that were created. You can see the email correspondence to and from. So if someone's out of the office, you can go in and you can see that history, and they can jump in and have all that context. And you can even see when the supplier views and downloads the RFQ files and then search across this. So that's just a snapshot of the capabilities within Silkline. I'll pause and leave it there, but I can do more in-depth demos if anyone is interested as a follow-up. All right, I know we talked a little bit about the integration between Ion and Silkline. Maybe Robert, you can give a little bit of color of how you kind of use both systems and what that integration feels like between the two systems?
Yeah, so it's always going to be difficult when you're kind of having two competing systems of record here. But I think you guys have set it up in a really efficient way that we have flags. Since data can be created in either of these two data systems, it's important to kind of give the system a flag as to which data system should it be considering as a source of truth. So we typically spread our procurement duties within Silkline. So Silkline can be great for processing a quote directly into a PO, but it might not be as great currently. I mean, this may not be the case now, but definitely in the future, there's a lot of improvements planned. As you've told me, we're really still doing MRP-driven procurement processes through Ion, due to kind of stored pricing history within the item master within Ion. So it's very easy to make POs both within Ion. It's very easy to make both POs within Silkline, and data between those POs transfers between the two systems seamlessly. It's really fast. I will contact you if it's slow because it slows me down. So one of the other things is, the Silkline enables kind of an expanded supplier profile. Currently, First Resonance Ion, you have a few fields in your vendor record. You can fill them out. You can have them as a baseline for the necessary information for a vendor. But if you wanted to have 10 different contacts in there, if you wanted to have a bunch of different information, you could probably set that up as custom attributes and manage it that way. But we're kind of adding additional contacts within Silkline because a lot of the RFQ processes are going through Silkline. Therefore, those extra contacts are very useful to have in Silkline for those purposes.
Yeah, and tagging supplier capabilities so that you don't have to rely on your supplier Bible of, hey, this supplier has these capabilities.
Correct.
I think one thing that's awesome, if I can just give a quick comment on that, Robert, what you described there, I think for a lot of manufacturers, ourselves included, this question around, source of truth or system of record is one that could be quite nerve-wracking, right? And I think there's still this idea of a central source of truth that people hold. It's not incorrect to have that desire, right? We all want to go to one place and get all of our questions answered and store all of our information and make it very reliable. But the thing I would offer manufacturers who have been used to solving that with literally one centralized database or one system, it's important to look at kind of how technology is evolving and think about like how these interoperable systems like Silkline and Ion are working and solving for exactly what Robert detailed here, right? It gives optionality. You could set up custom attributes over here, or you could use the first class supplier information that Silkline has as a first class supplier management system, and being able to toggle that on and off as you connect systems, but also as the business evolves, right? So as Machina scales, the context may change, and I think that's very powerful. So definitely would like nerd out on a separate conversation on what is the future of central source of truth. But it is something as an opportunity for manufacturers to think about not just where do I put all this information, but how do I bring it all together, right? And how do I use the systems to make better decisions in a really agile way? I think it's very powerful.
Absolutely. Thanks for that comment, Karan. I think one of the great things about First Resonance Ion is the ability to build on top of it, but at the user level, we built scripts and programs on top of First Resonance that if you were in another kind of ERP system, if you're on NetSuite, you are hiring a consultant and going through months and months and months of back and forth and invoices and scoping meetings to even create this kind of capability. And should you have the technical drive, should you have the resources available to do this, you can do it yourself within First Resonance Ion, and it's a really, really robust tool for working within your factory enterprise resources. So we're going to close out the webinar, and we'll just leave you with this last screen of some of the kind of unified procurement benefits that we've yielded from Silkline. One is, we've improved our on-time delivery probably by about 20%. Following up easily with vendors, leads to more responsiveness, leads to things arriving when they should. We have an increased cross-functional alignment. My teams that request things know that they know what to do. They know the avenues of information that they need to travel to in order to get the things that they want. And information is flowing back and forth in those lanes. Well, procurement velocity has sped up. I'm able to quote more parts, send more orders out, and drive more, confirmed orders into my system that we can then plan our MRP around, produce things faster, get things kitted sooner, and drive our schedule forward due to the benefits that are yield from this. And the last is our supplier relationships have gotten stronger. The suppliers that have really embraced Silkline have they've yielded the benefits. These suppliers can, we have actionable data on bid rate, win rate, lose rate of quotes. And, I think that's something that those are analytics that a lot of purchasing organizations don't capture is, do you know exactly what the bid rate is or the win rate is of your different suppliers? And we know that with Silkline.
And we find that is a leading indicator of how that supplier is going to prioritize your business when you actually go and place an order with them. If they're bidding on every single thing you're sending them, they're probably very motivated to win and keep that business.
Absolutely. It tracks how long it takes for them to respond to you.
Yeah.
And, that's great. These kind of data points allow you to kind of be more agile in your procurement operations. And it's really been a game changer here at Machina Labs. So, in closing here, I want to thank the team at First Resonance. I want to thank Karan for joining us on this call, and then Isaac and Brent, and the rest of the First Resonance and Silkline teams. You guys are doing great work. So thank you so much for your time.
It's our pleasure. Yeah, you bet. I know we had planned to save a little bit more time for questions, but we just have a couple minutes if people want to throw questions in the chat here. Otherwise, we're very happy to find time as a follow-up to answer any questions you have.